Hi, my name is Sara Quinn, and my fellowship for RJI has involved photojournalism and the importance of visual journalism in a community. I teach at the University of Minnesota, and I've done this project for RJI for and with the National Press Photographers Association. I've worked with Executive Director Keely Ramses and also Sue Morrow, editor of the NPPA magazine. At a time when many newsrooms have all but eliminated photo departments, and when stock images are used every day, even with news articles, folks at NPPA came to me and said, let's try to reset the narrative on quality visual journalism. Let's gather the voices of strong visual editors. That was like one of our main ideas. Let's get together with people who have a lot to say and whose voice really matters when it comes to the process of strong picture editing. Let's hear about images that inspired them, and let's get their best advice for powerful storytelling. I've done interviews with more than 20 leaders in visual journalism, and once we put that together, we thought, well, let's try to make this conversation go viral. So I've created a series of social media posts with some of the information that came from these interviews from people like Nicole Frugier, the director of photography at the San Francisco Chronicle. She told me about a story that happened last September when the skies one day turned orange. She said that photographers were posting a lot of incredible images on social media. And at one point, Barack Obama retweeted photographs and put them together in sort of a message about global climate change. And once that happened, Nicole said it was a great example of a local story made visual, shared, and understood around the world. The social media posts that we put together are on Instagram, on Twitter, and Facebook, and they include stories like the one that we heard from Luis Rios, director of photography at the San Antonio Express-News, when he talked about one particular day when more than 10,000 families lined up at a food bank at the beginning of the pandemic. And the photographer who covered this took such amazing images. When they were published, it drew attention from people all over Texas and all over the United States to the worries that families would have about getting by during the pandemic. People in the state and people who ran the food bank said that once those images were published, it made a huge impact on financial aid, and there was a big change in the process. They had a full-page ad that thanked the photographer, William Luther, and the San Antonio Express News for publishing those images. These are stories that really matter. We're posting things week after week, and we will be throughout this year on Facebook and on Twitter that distill the ideas that have come from these interviews. Here's a portion of a video.
I think what good photojournalism does is focuses a community's empathy. It is really putting the heartbeat of your community out there for everyone to see, and is asking your community to really look, to not just glance, to not pass it on the freeway at 65 miles an hour, but to actually look at what's happening in your community, good or bad, to bear witness to what's happening. And especially in our society that gets more and more unequal in terms of income, and people have siloed themselves online and in gated communities and in socioeconomic statuses. You don't share the same streets, you don't share the same schools, there's so much that we don't share anymore. And good photojournalism will force the viewer to share that space again. What happens when that disappears is that we become a society of cliche clip art that further numbs ourselves to the experience of our fellow citizens that are not like us. And I feel like photojournalists, we can't just call it in, right? We're on the scene, we're with people. If we're not physically holding their hands, we're holding their gaze. And you can't make clip art out of that. You can't get a stock photo of that.
We feel like the discussion that we're continuing is really important, and we want to spark more conversation about strong photojournalism. So that's one of 3 elements of this fellowship that we've chosen to focus on. The next is research. We said, let's find out what people notice about photojournalism and presentation. What do people value? What do they share? How do they come to understand a story? What do they remember and what do they trust? We have previous studies, some of which I've done for NPPA, that look at elements of photographs, and we're adding to that research with the help of RJI and this fellowship. We've decided to develop an online research tool that will help us gather data as people interact with visual formats, with photographs, with captions. And first up is a study that we're looking at on the best practices for developing captions. This study will launch March 1st of this year, and we hope to get 300 people going through this survey to look at 20 photographs with a variety of captions. We've come up with 4 different formats. We want to see if a minimal caption with just the very basic information helps to convey importance and storytelling and credibility of an image, something that has the basic who, what, when, where, and why, or perhaps a more well-developed caption of a certain length that includes a quote, or maybe even an enhanced caption that has a link to the photographer's bio. So those are the 4 formats we're studying. People will come to our new testing site that we've just developed with the help of RJI, and that has been developed by a group called Visura, which is a visual storytelling platform. This is a self-running survey. We'll be able to extract the data, and people will look at a variety of images with a variety of caption formats, and then answer a series of questions. What do you think the quality is of this photograph? What's the likelihood that you might share it? Does this information seem credible? And a series of other questions. And we're focusing in this study on the captions. Do people appreciate and understand and trust images that have a more developed caption? What are the storytelling components to a caption in terms of length and quotes that help to make a difference? And are there possible other formats, for example, the inclusion of information about the photographer, that help people connect and relate to the image? We have a sense of what we'll find about captions, but research is important. We want to be able to add to the actionable information about the process of editing pictures. The third piece of this fellowship involves free training materials that we've developed, basically a toolkit for picture editing. So we're offering these training materials free on our new training site. It will include a searchable resource of major research on how people interact with media, and we're hosting free customized workshops for small news organizations and startups. The training will be staffed with a speakers bureau that will boast some of the best visual coaches within NPPA. So we have 3 strong new pieces to add to the discussion about visual storytelling. Free training materials, a strong social media conversation. We're going to do our best to make it go viral, and an important new tool for research. We're so grateful to RJI for making all of this happen. Again, my name is Sara Quinn. This is how you can reach me. Please reach out if you'd like to be part of our study, if you're interested in the training materials, or if you'd like us to speak to your group. We're ready.
All right, Deborah, you want to go next?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. Let me share my screen right quick.
Share your screen.
Yeah. Can y'all see that?
We can. Thank you. Great.
Okay, great. So I'm going to quickly talk about my project. I know we don't have a lot of time, and then this is available online as well, and I'm happy to take questions. So just going to quickly go through what some of our objectives were for the project, and then we can talk about the tools. And again, all of my information is available. This website is up, by the way. It's unpublishingthenews.com. We are soft launching it this week, so you guys are getting a preview. We're asking some people to kind of kick the tires this week and see what's working, what's not. We're still adding content, and then we'll do an official launch hopefully next week. So just a working definition for those who say, what is unpublishing, which is about what my project is about. Basically, unpublishing is the term that has it's a little simplistic for what we're talking about, but we're talking about requests from third parties to either remove or significantly alter previously published news or feature content. Could be a photo, could be just a name of someone, could be a crime story often, or mugshot. Whoops. There we go. So my project really had three components. First was I wanted to establish an advisory board to help with this project. Then I wanted to partner with newsrooms. Of course, that's what the RJI Fellowship is all about, and I'll talk about that in just a minute, but to develop some resources that will be available on the site to address unpublishing, and then launch this website for the industry that will be an ongoing tool. This is our advisory board. I won't go over everyone, but I was very excited to get everyone who is on this page. Lots of journalism expertise, as well as privacy expertise, legal expertise. Obviously, Joy Mayer, a lot of you probably know her from Trusting News. So my first newsroom partnership was with the Columbia Missourian and KOMU here, because we can't forget broadcast. They have unpublishing requests all the time too. And for them, we wanted to develop a set of pre-publication practices, because one of the things that I've talked about quite a bit now in my research and in articles on the RJI site is that pre-publication is really where the unpublishing problems begin. And we're starting to see newsrooms make changes about how they approach their crime reporting, what type of crimes they're reporting, whether they're using mugshots or not, how they're dealing with children's names or other survivors of crime, that kind of thing. And then also to develop them a basic unpublishing policy. I have been an advocate for we need to crawl before we walk, and we're not quite ready to develop standards across the industry, but for now they at least need something to follow, because right now a lot of their policies, much like many newsrooms, are sort of understood but not written. And so that doesn't work. You know, we need them on paper. Second newsroom partnership was with the Chattanooga Times Free Press, which is my old paper where I worked. And for them, they needed to operationalize the process. And so we're developing a formal submission system and intake process that saves them so much time and energy going back and forth with people, making requests. Maybe they don't submit some documentation that could substantiate their requests, especially with crimes, and then develop a back-end tracking system where they can track, based on the requests they get in, how were those adjudicated by they have an unpublishing committee that meets to determine how to handle the request, and also then talk about what action did they take. You know, did they delist the item? Did they unpublish it? I see that extra comment, it's killing me. And so that all of these, again, will be available. The issue with this is that the industry is not tracking their requests nor how they are handling them, and that's a major accountability issue, and could really open the door for a lot of inequities. So the final deliverable, again, was this website, which is right here. It will have newsroom tools, industry research, a policy repository, and that's one thing I'd like to show you right quick. If this goes to the right page, yep. Sorry, let's see if I can make it pop up right quick. But we're going to do a policy call in the next couple of weeks. It's not showing up. Sorry about that. There's a page that asks for other newsrooms to submit their policies. And so we're going to be promoting that, because we want to develop a policy repository where people can come and see what other newsrooms are doing. And then also an editors forum where editors can connect. One of the things that I've determined from my research is that newsrooms often are not talking to one another as openly as they need to, because of the sensitive nature of unpublishing requests and that kind of thing. But we're starting to see more dialogue in the industry, and I would like to see that continue across news organizations, because again, ultimate goal would be to standardize some of these policies where possible. Excuse me. So I'll stop there. Once again, I will follow Sarah in saying thank you so much to RJI for allowing me to work on this project. I remember RJI asking why this project and why you, and I said, because it needs to be done. I definitely believe that this is going to be a value to the industry. And again, I am happy to take all feedback and suggestions on the site. It's going to grow with the industry's contributions. And so once again, feel free to test it out this week and give me a shout if you've got any questions. And I will say, I'm also working with other newsrooms who have contacted me during the fellowship. So I'm also happy to do that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any questions for Deborah? I don't see any in the Q&A box. And Deborah, you're on Twitter, right, at Unpub the News?
Yes, I am. And all of my contact information is in the slides on the website under current projects. Yep.
Great. All right. Dagmar, you want to go next?
Okay, there I am. Can you hear me? I had some problems with the power, so I hope it works now. I'm sharing my screen. Can you see it?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Okay, well, thank you so much. For me, it's a pleasure being here, and I'm really sad that this fellowship is ending. It was really a very, very good time for me and much support for our organization. I'm the CEO of Fundamedios USA, which is an organization that promotes freedom of expression and safety of journalists in Latin America. And since 2018, we do have an office in the United States, in Washington, D.C. And we work building bridges among journalists from both regions and also focus on advocate for Hispanic journalists. And that's why we presented RJI the idea of doing a research on discrimination against Latino journalists in the US and how this affects the community, Hispanic community, and how they get their information. Our report is already finished. We do have it in English and in Spanish, of course, and you can access to it on the Fundamedios website. On our main findings, we had almost 45% of the 115 journalists that were interviewed by us that they say they have felt discriminated against because different reasons. The main reason is salary or contract conditions that are different. And yes, Latino journalists may work harder and get paid less. But also the working conditions, the resources they have are different than their peers. In many occasions, Latino journalists or those who work for the Spanish language newscast, they work with fewer resources than their peers. A story that is broadcasted in English can be done by 2 or 3 people in a team, and the Spanish language journalist must work by himself or by herself to do it. There were also different testimonies of racism due to the appearance, due to the way the accent, or other reasons, or just racism, and we documented them all. And many journalists also said they had less opportunities for promotions or to grow in the media. On salaries, this is an example, and this is the pay study 2019 from the Washington Post Guild. It's a very, very clear study, and it's good to say that in the media, normally transparency about payment is not the norm. We talk about what's happening all around the world, but in media there is no transparency about payment. And the differentiation between gender and races is not clear in many of the studies. In the Washington Post study, it's very clear, and you've got, of course, on the top, the white man, and then with almost 20,000% less a year, Latino men, and with 30 or 35,000 less a year, the the Latino women. Of course, this is a very these are higher standards of salaries from the Washington Post, but it reflects on average what's happening in all the industry. We reported also several cases of verbal aggressions, of harassment and racism. The racism and aggressions, they come from the audiences that don't want to listen to what's happening to the Latino community, from people that are just telling Latino journalists, this is not your place, you should not be here, you should kill yourself, you don't deserve to be heard, your voice is not important. or also microaggressions that came within the same, in the same newsroom from colleagues or bosses. And those are all documented. Something that's also very important that we could report on our research was that Latino journalists, although they think they have the same access to information as their peers, they don't always have. And during this COVID crisis, at the beginning of this crisis last year, we reported several cases of Latino main media organizations such as Univision or Telemundo that didn't have access to direct interviews with authorities like governors or health department officers. So they couldn't get direct information for the Hispanic community that we know has been the hardest impacted by COVID. With this in mind, we developed a toolkit for to build capacity for Latina journalists on the pay gap, and we have it already on our website, so they can go through this toolkit. Or we started also training programs that we will have on Zoom. The toolkit starts raising awareness, and of course the standard in the industry in the United States is that Latinas get almost 45% paid less than their white men peers in all the industry. It also happens in the news media, although the average is 37, but we found testimonies of 45% less for women that are paid this in comparison to their white male peers that are even younger than they and have less experience. Our toolkit considers, of course, facing reality, and we present it in both languages, in Spanish and in English, and mixing both kind of Spanglish. That's common for almost the 40 million Latinos that live in the US and that understand both languages. We talk about the rights and how federal and state laws ban discrimination, and the value of the community, this large community of Spanish-speaking people around the world. Over almost 600 million people speak Spanish in 21 countries. So it's important to take care of this culture and bring this culture into the US also and take care of it. And of course, be Americans and talk and represent and respect all the values, but don't forget the heritage and take care of a language, because it opens, it brightens all your horizons. And of course, we work on the negotiation and interview skills with different tools we developed for that. And we had the help of different veteran journalists, Rebecca Aguilar from SPJ, Nora Lopez from the National Association of Hispanic Journalists, Marisol Seda, as well as experts from human resources who talk about interview tips and how to control internal dialogue and how to add value to your newsroom as a Latina, being bilingual and being tough to go there for the negotiation. We have also a role play. I had a great help from Pili Swanson, who is a student at the university. Thank you so much for your help, Pili. And we train people how to use the STAR technique to present all these skills and values they bring to the table. We will have our first Zoom training with the National Association of Hispanic Journalists in 2 days. So if you want to join, just visit the page of the National Association of Hispanic Journalists. We will have one each month for the next 3 months, and we will partner with other organizations. All the information is already loaded on our webpage. There we have different reports of other issues we work on as an organization, but you have the discrimination report as well as the toolkit. This is my information. I am available for any kind of questions you may have. And of course, I'm so grateful for all the support of RJI. We weren't able to do this and start like this in the US without your support. And to meet all the fellows, it was a pleasure for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I don't see any questions in the Q&A, so we'll go straight to the next person. And remember to contact all the fellows individually if you do have questions and you just don't want to ask them publicly. Clayton, would you like to go next?
Yeah, gladly. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Great. So I'm going to commit a slight presenter's faux pas and give you this presentation without going into presentation mode, because we're going to look at a couple different tabs in my browser. So hi, folks. My name is Clayton Aldern. I'm a data journalist and data strategist type, mostly working with an organization called GRIST right now, which is a nonprofit environmental magazine. We're based in Seattle, but we're nationwide, and we exist to think through this great global challenge of climate change, and in particular, think through it in a manner that hopefully brings it down to earth a bit more. And by that I mean ground these stories, of extreme weather and gradual temperature change and all the kind of confusing big data sets out there, ground them in terms of human experience, right? We've got something on the order of 10 years to avoid the most catastrophic impacts of climate change. And while people tend to believe that climate change is real, right? This is kind of the state of play now. About 73% of folks in the country believe climate change is real. Very few believe that we can stop it. And so GRIST is interested in shifting this narrative, grounding climate change in terms of human experience and ensuring folks feel motivated to act. What am I doing here with RJI? I see kind of an opportunity in that gap there, this solutions gap. And in particular, as a data journalist, I see the vast availability of something like climate data and environmental justice data as kind of providing some of the grounds for exploring some of these solutions and making them feel a little more real to folks. So the claim here is that data is going to drive the narratives I'm writing, but that narrative is in turn going to drive the action that we're looking for as an organization. So through this RJI fellowship, what I've really been trying to do is make climate data more accessible to readers. These are huge data sets. These are gigabytes and gigabytes often that climate modelers work with, and of course climate change is this big thing that stretches across borders and generations. How do we drag it into the present, right? It's really difficult to wrap our heads around. It doesn't follow the traditional trajectory of a given narrative arc, right? There's not like a villain in climate change unless you count like the fossil fuel sector, which perhaps we should, but in terms of traditional narrative tools, it's tricky to kind of wrap our heads around the climate. And so a good chunk of this fellowship has sought to make climate data more accessible, both to my own newsroom, but also to other newsrooms. And then there's kind of a part two that I'll talk about in just a little bit. So on that part one, what have we done thus far at GRIST? We've kind of started from the ground up and built this visual brand for data visualization, such that we now have a process in place whereby it's pretty darn cheap, by which I mean free. GRIST is a nonprofit newsroom, so to the extent that we can build things as leanly as possible, we're doing ourselves a favor. So this data visualization pipeline is darn cheap, and it's also darn quick. So with the goal of ensuring that newsrooms out there can build these types of pipelines from scratch and with very little staff capacity, we think we're developing something that works to those ends. Here are just a couple charts that we've made over the past 8 months or so. But what we're also thinking about is distribution, right? So how do we ensure that these visuals make it into the hands of people who've got broader influence? How do we reach as many folks as possible? So we have this distribution model in place whereby maybe we'll publish some data visualization in a video. We've got an audience of about 2 million, but then it ends up syndicated in a program for the Weather Channel where it reaches 160 million. So this is the kind of distribution that we're seeking to reach with our products. We also have this kind of natural approach to distribution whereby we're seeking to insert data visualizations and graphics into the hands of the powerful out there in the world. So here's an example of a senator picking up some of our visualizations and presenting them on the floor of the Senate during a floor speech. That's really exciting for us. We're also working internally to ensure that these kind of data-driven processes are guiding some of the decisions we're making as a journalistic institution. So that's all well and good. But I want to just spend, the last minute or two here thinking about where do we go from here. And in particular, I've over the course of this project and seeking to build out a climate data journalism unit and a climate data visualization team, have kind of faced myself, have kind of faced this situation, which I've noticed there are a whole lot of guides out there for how to be a data journalist, right? But there are very few for thinking about how one goes about this type of work in particular, building out a data journalism unit. How do you do it cheaply? How do you do it with very little staff capacity, right? If you're a small or a medium even, or a nonprofit newsroom, what does it mean to build out data capacity in your newsroom, regardless of kind of climate data or climate change? If you're interested in investing in data capacity, how do you do it, as cheaply as possible? So as we're thinking about building this workout at GRIST in particular, I've over the course of this fellowship also been in turn building out some tools to help other newsrooms kind of go along a similar journey. And so here are our steps going forward that we're hoping to pursue. But I'm just going to switch tabs here for a moment, because the other thing I'd like to show you is kind of the fruits of some of that. I'm going to move my mouse here. Some of the fruits of some of that other visioning work. So here we go. We're also pleased to launch as part of this effort what we're calling the Data Unit Guide. This is, as it says here, an organizational guide to data journalism for small to medium and nonprofit newsrooms. It is private right now, but will launch within the week, and it'll be at the URL doug.news, Data Unit Guide, doug.news. And what folks are going to be able to do here is think about some of these core organizational questions. And in particular, we want to understand the types of people we want to hire into these roles, how to organizationally structure a team like this, what kinds of tech and tools are available for teams who are interested in building out this kind of work, and then kind of some of the core organizational principles undergirding ensuring this type of unit is sustainable. So you can kind of think of this as a training protocol, or a series of how-tos, and furthermore, if you disagree with any of the findings here or the work that we've put forward, this whole site is open source. And so if you'd like to submit your own tool, if you'd like to submit a new section or copy edit something that I've messed up, we do have a GitHub repo where you'll be able to do so. And my wonderful research assistant has submitted some pull requests here that I'm sure she'll thank me if I get around to accepting. So this is all to say we are in the process of editing. This is going to be kind of a continual effort in terms of bringing this type of organizational expertise to the fore. But we'll be really pleased if folks take this and run with it and give it a shot in their own newsroom. So I think that's probably about all I have time for. The main point I'd like to make is I kind of started this project with the aim of thinking through what it means to make climate data in particular more accessible. And I think it's moved to a point of thinking through the manners in which newsrooms writ large can kind of bring data more readily into their production processes. This is kind of a more general problem than just climate, obviously, 2020 hindsight, I guess. But I think some of the work we're doing at GRIST is kind of bridging both of those gaps. So really pleased to be able to share some of this with you, and very, very thankful for the folks over at RJI for helping us make it happen.
All right, thank you so much. Let's see, let's switch here. All right, just checking for questions. We're good. Kristen, you want to go next?
Yes, hello. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Okay, and then I will present this to you guys. So my my fellowship has been on one of the oldest brands that newspapers and local news have, and that is the obituary. And you know, specifically resurrecting feature obituaries. So my hypothesis when I started is that obits are a local news brand that really no one else has mastered. There's an opportunity to tell these stories well on digital and in new ways and get people on the path to subscriptions and supporting local newsrooms. And that an obits newsletter is one way to build community. So here's what we've learned so far. People want to read about ordinary people who've done extraordinary things. I know that from the data that we're keeping track of with the Tampa Bay Times, where I'm publishing these using their analytics tool Parsley. And so I'm going to just give you the rundown of the top 5 stories. So the first one, and this was one that I did back in July, was on a Guyanese immigrant who died from COVID-19. That piece has had a total of 27,000 page views with an average read time of 2 minutes and 51 seconds. The second and the third on the list have just been published last week and today and are doing really well. There was one on a Tampa police lawyer who was also a girl dad and a reptile lover. And that piece last week has gotten 25,000 plus page views with an average read time of about a minute. We published a piece yesterday on a drag queen who went into public health and also died from the coronavirus. And that piece has gotten more than 11,500 page views with an average read time of about a minute and a half. That's literally just since yesterday. I did a piece about a building. I wrote about a famous beach dive that was closing around the holidays. And that piece got 9,800 page views with a little more than 2-minute average read time. And then the matriarch of a local beach town here in Tampa Bay, Paso Grill, that piece had 9,700 page views with an average read time of 2 minutes and 20 seconds. So one of the things that's happened as newsrooms have shrunk and we've lost these feature obits is newsrooms are still writing news obits on politicians and local famous people. But I think what these numbers are showing us is that people want to read about ordinary people who have great stories. We found that feature obits build loyal audiences. So my newsletter is started at the end of middle of December. And so far we have about 450 subscribers, which is tiny. We're growing at an average of about 30 subscribers a week, and it has an average open rate of 45%. So small, but dedicated group of people. We've also found that obits are evergreen, and this is something that has surprised me. In my entire career, I have never been able to look back at work that in some cases a span of several years and seeing that people are still finding it and reading it and sharing it. So what we found is people are kind of going down the rabbit hole once they read a story that they like. They're finding more, sometimes by clicking on some links that we've shared, sometimes by following my author bio to my author page and discovering other stories that they like. So we're working on a more intentional approach to help get those evergreen pieces out and help them continue to build readership. These pieces are getting people on the path to subscriptions. So just from a real quick check, I can tell that 200 times from reading my pieces since July, people have clicked over to the Tampa Bay Times subscription page. So they're on the path to subscriptions. And finally, this was not the purpose of my fellowship, but I do think it's something that needs attention. Paid obits are still making newsrooms a lot of money, and they're not having to do much to maintain that. As somebody who covers local news for the Poynter Institute, I understand how important that is, but there's a huge equity issue. There's lots of stories we're missing because it costs $1,000 or $2,000 to run a decent family written obituary on a person. So that is an area I would like to see get more attention. I am not done with my fellowship. I have extended through this summer. And so the things that we're working on next are a playbook on reviving feature obits, a playbook on launching an obits newsletter, and a playbook on marketing those two and building community as an audience. And for that, I'm getting to work with a really great and enthusiastic class of students at Mizzou. There's a couple other real quick takeaways that I think apply to all of our work. These pieces have to have great headlines and great photos. And, you know, it's not hard to find great photos in people's own personal archives, but you really have to get the headline and the photo right. They want, I think people want to read about people that they know about, should know about, or wish they knew about. And so really what I'm finding is the stories that are doing best are about people that are known in their own communities, like the beach or the police or the drag community in Orlando, that then the rest of us can open up and share and learn more about. These obits are not news obits. And so for that reason, I don't write them immediately. In fact, I think out of respect for families, it's okay to give a family like a month. There are, you know, lots of compelling reasons when someone dies to write something right away, but in the fog of grief, it's sometimes hard to process some of the questions that I want to know as a reporter. And so I've gotten into a pattern of giving people about a month before I knock on their door. And as somebody who's lost people in my life, a month, you know, there's still a lot of fog there, but it started to clear a little bit, at least as some final arrangements have been made. And finally, this is really high stakes work that I don't think feels like it. But if you are somebody who is writing what is basically the last story that will ever run on a person's life, it really deserves very careful fact checking and context checking to make sure that you're getting it right. That's something that's really mattered to me, and I think has been a quality control measure that has helped us be pretty successful. So that's it for me, and I would love to talk about this more. I'm looking for some newsrooms that want to try this and pilot it. And so my email is khare@poynter.org, and I'm on Twitter at Kristen Hare.
All right, thank you so much. And Max, last but not least.
Hello, let me just share my screen. Okay, I am not as good as everyone else as making PowerPoint, but this should work. Let me just get this full screen. Okay, so my name is Max Siegelbaum. I am one of the co-executive directors of Documented, and we are in a nonprofit newsroom based in New York City, and we cover immigrants. We cover immigration as an issue, so like visas and everything you read about ICE and all of that in the immigration courts. And we also cover immigrant communities, so we do news for the immigrants. And my time at RJI was based around a product we have called Documented Seminal. So when we first started, we wanted our news to be read by the people who it was about, which was immigrant communities. And we noticed, you know, we translated a few of our articles and we put them online and sort of distributed them in the same way that we had always, which was tweeting and our newsletter. And we realized they weren't getting much traffic. And part of the reason why was that our website wasn't known within that community. So we did some research and kind of looked at the various different platforms that undocumented people living in New York, which is who this product is aimed at, use to read and disseminate news. And with the resounding result was that it was all on WhatsApp. People were being forwarded messages, they were forwarding them to other people, but pretty much lived entirely on WhatsApp, not a ton of newsletters or you know, some Google search, but really this was clearly the main thing. So we launched a beta version of Documented Seminal, which was a weekly newsletter about immigration policy and various programs in New York and New York City and New York State aimed at helping undocumented immigrants with a number of different problems, from health to legal status to you know, food aid to financial aid, all of that stuff. So we launched that, and it was kind of ad hoc for a while. We were working with part-time writers and people who were generous with their time, basically, because we didn't have much funding to kick it up to the next level. And then we applied to RJI and we got the funding that allowed us to hire a full-time staff member to just focus on WhatsApp and growing the community and sort of deepening the practice. So on a basic level, this is how you sign up. The WhatsApp interface is very clunky. It's not designed for this. So you have to go to our website, documentedny.com/WhatsApp, and basically send us a message and then add the phone number we use as a contact. So your phone, WhatsApp will recognize the account and accept our messages. And we launched that, and the pandemic hit and it just completely changed everything. And we were sort of scrambling to understand what we needed to do. And our audience editor had this dream of creating basically a guide of being undocumented in New York, from answering questions on, the very specific circumstances that people find themselves in because they don't have, the proper status, and solutions around those problems. So everything from starting a business to seeking healthcare, to getting a lawyer, to ITIN numbers, and all of these things, driver's licenses, questions that our readers would ask us, and we would find out the answer and turn that into a piece of content, whether it was an audio clip, whether it was a step-by-step guide, whether it was a Q&A with a doctor or a lawyer. We just sort of played around with the format and dissemination of how to answer these questions. And that allowed us to kind of experiment and see what was working and what wasn't working, all which with the goal of kind of answering these very pressing questions. And sometimes someone will message us through WhatsApp and have asked for a single thing, and we'll get back to them. Sometimes someone will message us and they'll have an idea for a story or an investigation, and we'll put a reporter on that and have them investigate that. So it's very fluid. The two constant things are every week we send out the newsletter in text and in audio, which is kind of done as a conversation between two people sort of going through the week's news. We had some feedback from our readers that not everyone had terrific reading comprehension, and some people preferred to listen rather than read just generally. So then we created that. But since we launched this, the more civic focused wing of Documented has really grown, and it's something we really are starting to take seriously. And towards the end of the RJI Fellowship, we sort of started to expand the ideas that were underpinning our WhatsApp group. We had clearly worked up a great amount of trust between the community and us, and they had started to give us tips. It started when we did a collaboration with the local Univision station to debunk misinformation that was being spread around social media on WhatsApp. So we did a call out for our readers who sent us posts they had received or been forwarded, and we fact checked them. So for example, there was a rumor going around that Amazon was giving $150 to people for COVID relief. They sent that to us. We called Amazon and they said, no, that's not true. So we relayed that back to our readers, and then we did 10 of those. And I think that experience just helped us to understand that beyond kind of providing this almost social service of providing people with information and telling them where to go, this can be incorporated into our practice as a newsroom as well, and more sort of hard news and investigative reporting. And we started to do more and more call outs and about different subjects. Tell us what you're experiencing. Has anyone seen this? Send us a note about what you want us to investigate. And now we've begun to incorporate it and are reporting more and more. So these are two headlines of stories we did based on the experience of our readers. And on the left is about a grant that the Open Society Foundation had given to the city of New York to distribute as coronavirus aid for undocumented people. And our readers had heard about it, but they called around and they had no idea how to actually access the fund. And this was something we kept hearing over and over. So we asked a few of our readers if they wouldn't mind speaking to a reporter, and we interviewed them, and then they, the reporter did what reporters do, is called around to the various organizations to get comment. And then we published a story, which was our best read. We also translated it into Spanish, and it was our best read story in Spanish ever. So that kind of inspired more stories later down the line. We now have a little logo, which you can see on the right, that we put at the top of every story that features the voices of our community. And this one was just about rent relief and how hard it is for people to apply to rent relief. It was a very complicated process to get it, and just how the system was failing. And that was also just the proactive questions from our readers and our audience editor kind of keeping that in mind and keeping a mental tally of this month, a lot of people are asking about this, or a lot of people are asking about how do I extend my tourist visa if I'm stuck here because of the coronavirus. So, that was part of that. So that's kind of what I am excited about pursuing in the future, is taking this sort of fledgling community-based reporting model and building it and growing it. We're about to launch 2 new similar projects, one for immigrants from the Caribbean, which will be in English, and one for immigrants who speak Chinese. And those 2, they may be on WhatsApp, they may be on WhatsApp, and WeChat. We're doing the research right now, but that's going to be something we'll pursue. And as those communities grow, we'll continue to get more tips for news stories. So we will continue to grow on this. I have a presentation I created, sort of an instruction guide on how to build your own version of this. I think one of the things I've learned is that this can be applied to a lot of different communities for reporters all over the country. You could do this on the housing beat in anywhere. You could do this even, something like oil and gas workers. Any place where there's a community of people who have a vested interest in certain subjects, I think these principles apply. So that's kind of it. I can share anything. I wrote some articles about this for RJI. This is my contact information. So you can send me an email if you're curious, or if you want any of the documents we created through this fellowship. And this is the sign-up page for WhatsApp and our website if you're curious about that as well. So thank you to RJI for making this all possible. And yeah, I'm always open for conversations if anyone wants to chat. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Well, that is perfect timing. If anyone has questions, feel free to email any of our fellows or me. I'm always happy to help. And we will be posting all their resources at rjionline.org under their names, and you can find all their articles there as well. So you can read what they wrote for the past 8 months about their projects. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, fellows, for sharing. You all did wonderful work, and we're so proud of everything you've accomplished, and we're going to miss you all so much. So we will keep tabs on your work and keep in touch, and we're very excited to see what you'll do next. Have a great day, everybody.